a 15 bucks down there this morning. But I'm like, she was overtime. They gotta give it to you. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what time it is. Well, hopefully I'll just switch out someone for me next week. Somebody a coworker. Yeah, he may.
It's not like they can send you. They can't send you to check out a wreck.
There you go.
That's the thing I used to do.
Morning. It don't look too bad, actually. But the bed is hard as hell, man.
Oh, man. What?
The bed. Huh?
Morning. How are you here? Thanks.
But it's not bad.
Hanging in there. How are you?
It's not on this one.
Yeah.
Walk out the door in the morning.
I'm okay with it. As long as it's not.
And the breakfast makes me want to.
Yeah. Sometimes I really like that. That's what we drink separately because she.
Yeah, alright. Can't wait to go back to Florida on Saturday for a day.
Oh.
To see how hot it's
Yeah. Age number 5? Yeah.
We go back home for
Next week, Rachel and I are both down.
Good morning, Cynthia.
Oh. One of my colleagues.
Just about to clock in to work right now. But I'm just going to see if this will play
I'll run back and see the family, coming back in 2 weeks.
while I work, and then I can listen. You're going to see him pull up. You're going to see him pull up here in just a few minutes. Hopefully we're doing good.
She said she's tired and doesn't want to start out this morning, so. But I'm going to break down, so.
Here we go.
Who's this?
Oh no, they're just coming to clear the stuff away, so.
Yeah, Woodbury.
He's coming soon, probably.
Yeah. That's like all the telltale sign.
Yep.
I think it's the audio from them being outside. I'm pretty sure that they don't mean to be talking into their cameras right now. I think they're just kind of talking in the background, but the court will sound a lot better.
Here we go. Here it comes. Get ready. Get ready, get ready, get ready. Alright, so what I'm gonna do now?
Yes. That courthouse is so chandeliers. But yeah.
Alright guys.
Cheers.
Did you say you're from Poland?
Yes. Are you Polish?
I think, no, not really. My grandmother is Czech, but I was just curious, how, a lot of people like follow this story in Europe? Or?
No.
No? Okay, I was kind of, I was kind of surprised.
I work for Reuters
Yeah.
in New York City.
Oh, okay.
So this is for American audience.
Ah, I understand. For some reason I thought they were like a European agency.
That's what people think when they hear my accent or they hear
Okay.
when, you know.
But you just work in America.
I work in America.
Okay.
I started working for Reuters in America in New York in 2008. You were a baby, probably. Like, I'm so old. I feel so old. You were in like kind of elementary school or something.
No, I'm about to be 30, so
Okay.
I was like in high school, I guess.
In high school, yeah. So yeah, I'm one of those immigrants
Pretty cool.
who won the green card lottery. Now I'm here in America. Yeah, no, nobody really cares in Europe. Although we have a bureau in London, and basically my signal goes to DC and New York, and then it's taken by London.
Okay.
And apparently they are so excited about it. Like,
Really?
why?
That's interesting to me. I mean, I guess people like,
American stories, I guess.
or just like true crimes are pretty popular, I guess.
Yes. And also, we have a lot of, we work with all the networks, like CNN, ABC, all of them take our feed. And I think the feed goes to London, but London handles relationships with all those American clients, US clients. So I think that's why they are excited about it. Or
Someone was explaining it to them, and they're like,
Chattanooga,
"Oh, that's
or
interesting."
someone is calling them, "Hey, we need Murdaugh."
Yeah, that's right.
How do you pronounce his name?
I believe it's Murdaugh.
Murdaugh.
How do you pronounce his last name?
Murdaugh.
Murdaugh.
Yeah, like the guy who owns Fox News, right? The same kind of pronunciation.
Is it pronounced the same way as the guy who owns Fox News, or no?
No.
No. Okay. And I think people have been pronouncing his first name Alec.
Like,
C.
I see it,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, the first one, the Fox News guy is Murdaugh, probably. Murdaugh, and this one
I
might
think
be
so.
Murdaugh.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just sitting all day in my car and just chatting up whoever comes.
Yeah, no, of course.
I'm on my, I am
Standing
Sam like,
around.
I feel lonely.
So,
Yeah.
you guys have a television channel, or is it? Because I've seen you guys have a lot of like online publications, but do you guys do television as well?
So we do syndicated news, which pretty much means that we, like for example, I film everything, and this goes to
It can be like distributed to other people.
distributed to all
Okay.
the networks and their
Okay.
affiliates, and
So kind of like AP type.
yes,
Or, yeah, okay.
yes, and TV stations like BBC, Poland, like all TV stations in
Okay.
Poland take our stuff, Germany, everywhere.
Okay, cool.
So basically, we don't have a channel, but all channels use our stuff.
That makes sense.
All channels use them. This flag is moving today. I'm going to take a photo.
Finally get a shot of it.
Yes.
You seem like a dog person. Do you have a dog at home?
I do. I miss my Woody.
I have a three-legged border collie beagle mix.
Oh, beagles are border collies are
Yeah.
so cute.
Oh, okay.
This is
That's my wife.
oh my god. It looks like Woody. Like a little bit. Like the markings are similar. I'll show you.
Oh, here, my freelance is called Tripod Productions, and so he's the tripod, he's the logo.
That's awesome. I'm going to connect with you. So that's
Oh,
my
he's very
Woody.
cute. What kind of dog is he?
He's a mix of pit bull and all the scary dogs, like Alaskan. Yeah. Oh, this is me and him.
My wife works for a equestrian center, so he goes to work every day. He goes
With
to.
horses.
He lives on a farm. He's a very happy.
Oh
farm
my
dog.
goodness. This is him. This is my boyfriend.
Oh, very cute.
I love him too.
Yeah.
So he lives on a farm. That's the life
Let me see if I can find
we would like to give him. This is when he was a baby, when we adopted him. This.
Yeah, we kind of see it.
Yeah, but he plays dogs, Woody I love this. Oh, sweet. Oh my God, he's so cute. Look how
He's
happy
got a
he is.
really big tummy.
That's fine.
It's fine.
Makes him cute, I think. Let's see, it's tripod.
Oh. And maybe so it's this. Yeah. And this is just my business account, but I have one for like my personal. If you want dog photos, the dog is calling on. But I post them sometimes.
So you work as a freelance, yeah, and you just, you like hook up with different companies, right? Lower
Yeah, so they called me to work on this, and
Looks like he muted it. He'll probably just mute it till the trial starts.
Them was at dinner, that he took a nap. Of the Alec Murdaugh trial. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber.
So you found the phone, Maggie's phone, by family member using Find My iPhone.
And I think it was John Marvin is the one that assisted us with that.
And do you think John Marvin was using Buster's phone to do that?
I don't have a clue what he was using.
And then when the phone was collected, you were provided the password. Remember, you testified the password was provided.
We were provided the PIN to open the phone. Yes, sir.
Are you aware that Alec Murdaugh provided the PIN to SLED so they could open Maggie's phone?
Again, I don't know where the passcode or PIN came from, but we were provided a PIN.
Day 5 of the Alec Murdaugh trial, and the prosecution is continuing their case against the former renowned South Carolina attorney. Now, as we've been reporting here on Sidebar, Mr. Murdaugh is accused of murdering his wife Maggie and son Paul by allegedly shooting them to death on the family property back on June 7th, 2021. The theory behind this, although not fully articulated yet by the prosecution, but this is where we understand they're going, is that Alec Murdaugh did this as a way to gain sympathy, as a way to create a distraction from his alleged financial misdeeds, which were about to be unearthed at that time. You see, I should tell you as an aside, Murdaugh faces over 90 charges related to these alleged financial crimes, including stealing from clients. So this would be a way to take a focus away from him. The defense says not only does the circumstantial evidence presented by the prosecution not add up, but that Murdaugh loved his family and that he would never do this. But okay, day 5. Here we go. A lot to talk about. First up, we saw the cross-examination of Senior Special Agent Jeff Croft from SLED. Now, as we previously reported here on Sidebar, there was this recording that was played for the jury. It was an interview of Alec Murdaugh where he allegedly says, quote, "I did him so bad," seemingly referring to Paul. As we discussed, is this Murdaugh confessing to killing his son Paul? Does it mean something else? Or is it possible he said, "They did him so bad and not I"? Well, let's hear defense attorney Jim Griffin, who started the day by pressing Mr. Croft on this.
And at various points in time, you were asked, what did he just tell you? Did he just tell you this? Do you remember that?
I do, sir.
And then you get to one point in the interview where you're asked, what did he just say after you said it must be tormenting? And you testified that Alex said on the video captured by audio that it was so bad, I did him so bad. That's what you testified to yesterday.
Yes, sir, that is what I testified to.
Now, are you 100% confident that Alex said, I did him so bad, rather than they did him so bad?
I am 100% confident in what I heard and I interpreted him as saying.
In fact, they slowed down the recording too.
Your Honor, we'd like to play it again at 1/3 speed to slow it down. It's just the same. Thank you.
Your Honor, reject playing it at 1/3 speed. There's no foundation laid for who's manipulating it, how it's being manipulated. I think obviously we have it in real time, but there would have to be some additional foundation.
Please play at 1/3 speed.
And sitting here talking today is tough. It's just so bad.
if you ask me, I hear it both ways. If you say, listen for the I hear the I. If you say, listen for the they, I hear the they. I'll tell you this. If the prosecution is resting their case on an I or they got much bigger problems, all right? I think this is significant, but I don't think it's going to make or break this case, especially considering that Agent Croft didn't follow up with questions to Murdaugh about this. No follow-up questions to him on this alleged confession. Now, he would testify that he took note of this. He said that he would ask him later about it. Prosecutors even tried to suggest that this wasn't an interrogation. They didn't want to throw Murdaugh off. I don't know. I'll tell you, in the end, it's going to be up to the jury to determine what they think of that recording. All right, let's move on to cell phone activity, which is absolutely crucial in this case. We learned certain things from Maggie's phone log. I'll give you some examples. We learned that at 7:50 on June 7th, Maggie called a Barbara, and that would be the last call that she ever made or received.
In your review of Maggie's call logs, was this the last answer, or excuse me, the last phone call that was either dialed or answered by someone on Maggie's phone?
I would have to check the logs again,
Sure.
but I believe so.
I'll let you have it back. Take a look.
Yes, sir, that's correct. That's the last answered call or one that was shown in the direction of outgoing.
All right. No more outgoing calls that night, correct?
No, sir,
June 7th?
correct.
And no more answer calls the night of June 7th. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, we also know that Maggie read a group text at 8:31:16 seconds. The last read text was at 8:49:27 seconds. And remember, prosecutors believe that the killings happened at around 8:50 p.m., so this time frame is crucial. The device locks at 8:49:31 seconds, and then this is fascinating. From 8:53 to 8:55:59, there are steps that are recorded on Maggie's phone. And during that time, the orientation changes to landscape mode. In fact, it seems that the camera was turned on for 1 second at 8:54, and between 9 and 10 p.m., more steps are recorded. So this suggests that someone may have been trying to use her phone and may have been walking with it. And we also know that Maggie's phone was found on the side of the road. So this phone tells us a lot. But now let's get into what Alec Murdaugh did.
What's the next call you see on this log?
Moving up the call log, the next call I see is from 1-803-942-1227 on line 5. It has the name of Alex. The time received on that call is at 9:45:32 p.m. UTC -4.
All right. And that's lines 5 and 6, correct?
Yes, sir.
For the same call, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And finally, let's talk about lines 3 and 4. What information do you see there?
On lines 3 and 4, they're the same call from 1-803-942-1227. On line 4, it shows it as PA. Direction is an incoming call, and it was received at 10:03:58 p.m. UTC -4 as a missed call.
All right. And to clarify, these last 5 calls from Alex, were any of them answered?
No, sir.
And previously, we looked at when you took pictures of Maggie's phone, you took a picture of her call log, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right. And I'm showing you again. I'm going to put it up on the screen. It's been admitted, Exhibit 278. And we saw that numeral 5 next to Alex's name, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And that represents 5 missed calls.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And I don't know if you're doing math while we went through that, and we can look at it again if you'd like, Lieutenant Dove, but did you count the calls from Alex that were missed in a row as we went through that call log?
Yes, sir, I came up with 5.
Okay.
And he also texts his wife, Maggie, as well.
That entry is at 9:47:23 p.m.
And what is that?
It is a text message that was received on that from Alex. It says, "Call me, babe."
And was that text ever read? I know that's referencing the previous report.
No, sir, that text was not read.
So this is all important for different reasons. One, prosecutors are establishing a timeline. They're showing why they believe the killings happened at 8:50, and they're showing that Alec was purposely making it look like he wasn't there with his wife. Remember, Alec Murdaugh says that he never went with Maggie and Paul down to the kennels where their bodies were ultimately found, that the last time he saw them was at dinner, that he took a nap, he went to see his ailing mother, he had texted and called Maggie during these times, and then when he finally got back to the property, he found their bodies and then called 911 at 10:06 p.m. All right, now let's get into guns and ammunition, another big focus on this case. The prosecution called John Bedingfield, Murdaugh's second cousin, who is a South Carolina Department of Natural Resources officer and a custom gun maker. And who did he make guns for?
How many Blackouts, AR-style rifles, did you make for Alec Murdaugh?
3.
And when was that last one made?
2018.
April?
April 2018.
Now, we can't forget that the murder weapons haven't been recovered in this case. The prosecution believes, though, that they are a .300 Blackout rifle and a 12-gauge shotgun. Their claim is that when looking at the property, where there are tons of guns and ammunition sprawled all across the place, they could say, well, the guns and the bullets that were used to kill Maggie and Paul, they match in different ways to the guns and the bullets that were found around the property. That's how we know that the family weapons were the murder weapons.
I need to collect them. I saw one over here. There's 2 right there.
Okay, yes, he actually spent
I'm gonna get a dynamic. All right, go ahead and pick that one up. There's 2 right there.
Yep.
They've been there a little while. Should be 300s. There's one to your right.
Yeah, 300, yep.
Yeah. And it was, I think there's 5 total I saw.
So while the idea could be that, well, these are not typical guns and ammunition, and of course the family weapons are the murder weapons, listen to this cross-examination of Bedingfield by the defense.
And have you recommended to a number of the customers to 300 Blackout to root out the nuisance pods?
I have.
Do you have any estimate how many 300 Blackouts you've sold over the last 4 or 5 years?
No, sir, I wouldn't. I've a little over 600 firearm transfers. I wouldn't know.
Think it's more than 100?
I don't know. It's a lot, but I don't know how many.
All right.
I will say this. Even assuming it wasn't someone else's guns, even assuming it's Murdaugh's family gun, the Murdaugh family guns, how does this tie back to Alec? Yes, it's his property. He knows where the guns are. He knows about the guns. The killings happened on the property. But is it possible that someone else, or maybe even 2 people, as the defense theorized, 2 shooters, took Murdaugh's guns and shot Maggie and Paul? Maybe an obstacle for the prosecution, but this is, I want to be clear, this is just a building block in their case. They are presenting a totality of the circumstantial evidence case, and this is just a piece of the overall puzzle. And that's all we have for you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here on Sidebar. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.
session. Judge Newman presiding. Please be seated.
Good morning. First, I want to address the ruling yesterday overruling the objection by the defense to the state's question of the witness on redirect as to whether he was aware of certain things that had occurred earlier on June 7th involving Mr. Murdaugh, or Murdaugh, Duck. In the questioning, cross-examination of the witness by Mr. Griffin, the witness was asked whether he could think of any reason, the gist of it, if he could think of any reason possible why Mr. Murdaugh would commit the crimes he's accused of committing. That, in effect, turned the cross-examination of that witness from dealing with the specific issues in the case to having that witness testify as a character witness for Mr. Murdaugh. Among his other areas of inquiry was his being a loving father, great provider, financially secure, things of that nature, all indicating an opinion by that witness as to the good character of the defendant, either through direct statements or circumstantially through the evidence that was adduced from that witness. In the court's view, that opened the door for the state to respond by asking questions, as the state did. Hence, the court overruled the objection. In addition to all of that, the objection was totally inappropriate. As the court laid out and reviewed with the parties early in the trial, that objection should be made and the legal basis stated. An objection of totally inappropriate is, in the words of Judge Joe Anderson, in effect, no objection at all. That's not a legal basis for an objection. That summarizes the basis for the court's ruling on that issue as to those questions yesterday. And that character type evidence was not only sought by from Mr. Gibson, but also, was it Loving? But also Mr. Loving. And none of that really implicated Rule 404, 404B. One, it opened the door. Number two, it's 404A type reputation questioning that the state had a right to respond to per the rules. And thirdly, it addressed an issue raised in the case by the defense. The defense in the case has primarily been the defendant has such a great character that he could not possibly have committed these offenses. That's been a general thread from opening statement throughout. In addition, the defense introduced through that witness, which was also introduced through other testimony in the case by the defendant, that the boating case was a reason for the murders to have occurred, and by the defense inquiring of the witness yesterday as to his knowledge and belief concerning, or his knowledge concerning the boating case, that likewise opened the door for the state to address that issue. And that's the basis for the court's ruling as to opening the door, introducing the boating case, and reputation type evidence that the state had a right to respond. Under Rule 403, yet to be addressed by the court is Rule 404 issues. And those issues will, to some degree, have to be addressed in camera. And I'm wondering if the state has other witnesses to testify as to other things, since we have the jury here ready to go, prior to addressing any other.
Well, we do have first of all, we do have a Snapchat custodian who has flown in that we need to get in so that person can make the flight. Based on how things ended yesterday, I was prepared this morning. We were planning on going forward with some of the witnesses from the law firm, and that's going to, there's certainly stuff beyond 404, but that's also going to put some of the 404 issues squarely into play. So that's kind of where we were planning to go this morning, Your Honor, with the testimony that we have. I can certainly get some more forensic people rolling. I apologize if I sort of misread what we needed to be ready to do, but that's kind of what we focused on last night and are ready to address this morning.
Yeah, well, the court didn't have a lot of time to do jury planning issues, and it might have, the jurors typically come at 9:30. It might have been a better idea had, with greater thought, to have had them come later. But I don't know how long these issues will take to be addressed.
I think with the two law firm witnesses out of the gate, I think once the court has, we could do some very focused in-camera testimony, and I think that for those witnesses, the court can then rule on what's admissible and what's not, and once that's done, then we can get underway with the jury for those witnesses and proceed accordingly. And then, of course, we can certainly have a discussion as far as other witnesses, and then perhaps arrange a time to do any other in camera. But I think setting the table with these two witnesses is going to set the table for many of the issues that, whether they're in or out, that the court has to decide.
All right. Well, first, as it relates to Rule 404, and Rule 404B states that evidence of other crimes or wrongs is not admissible to prove the character of a person in order to show action in conformity therewith. In other words, not admissible to show propensity to commit the crime or a crime, but it may be admitted for certain other reasons, including motive, identity, intent, and perhaps the existence of a common scheme or plan. Additionally, I'll address it later regarding res gestae, but my view of the evidence is that evidence of the other alleged crimes can be introduced in this case to show motive, intent, common scheme or plan. Given the proper analysis as it relates to that evidence being offered. As I indicated earlier, that the court agrees with the view in as expressed by the court in U.S. v. Siegel, 536 Federal 3rd 306, wherein the court addressed the issue of previous crimes involving, previous alleged crimes involving multiple victims, and that the state should be able to pursue its theory of proving that why suddenly, or why some such tragic, the motive for such tragic an occurrence to have taken place on the dates alleged here. And under the federal rule, it goes on to say that evidence of other crimes or bad acts is necessary if it is an essential part of the crimes on trial, or where it furnishes part of the context of the crime. This state has not adopted that portion of Rule 404B, but the courts have addressed that issue in some of the cases, particularly one that stands out to me as one of my cases, State v. Frankie Lee McGee from Richland County, in which the res gestae was used as a basis for the courts properly allowing certain evidence, including evidence of commission of an earlier crime, the test being whether it logically relates to the crime with which the defendant is charged. Court states in that opinion under res gestae that one of the accepted bases for the admissibility of the evidence of other crimes arises when such evidence furnishes part of the context of the crime or is necessary to a full presentation of the case, or is so intimately connected with and explanatory of the crime charged against the defendant, and is so much a part of the setting of the case and its environment that its proof is appropriate in order to complete the story of the crime on trial by proving its immediate context or the res gestae or the uncharged offense is so linked together in point of time and circumstances with the crime charged that one cannot be fully shown without proving the other, and thus is part of the res gestae of the crime charged. And where evidence is admissible to prove this full presentation of the offense, there is no reason to fragmentize the events under inquiry by suppressing parts of the res gestae. And interestingly, involved in that case, the court held that did not require a 403 analysis. Because the evidence was properly admitted as part of the res gestae, the issue of whether or not a 404B analysis was done was not necessary. And at this point, the court hasn't addressed any particular issue under 404B, but I find that it is admissible provided that the proper scrutiny is done in relation to clear and convincing evidence and a logical relationship to the offense for which we're having this trial. And additionally, as relates to intent, evidence tending to prove a defendant's state of mind or intent at or near the time of the crime is relevant to establish possible guilt. So there are many areas under which it's appropriate for the court to consider admitting this evidence of other crimes, other bad acts, in a manner that does not address or seek to have the jury conclude that it's propensity evidence, and the court will address all of that as we proceed. Yes, sir. Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to get some arguments on the record for purposes. Yes, as to Your Honor's conclusion that we opened the door by presenting evidence of good character, I would respectfully disagree, and the evidence that we presented was specifically limited to the relationship between the defendant and the victim for which he's accused of murdering. In our view, that is not character witness. That's a factual issue relating to the relationship between the parties. And so I just want to put that on the record. Your Honor puts great emphasis and reliance on U.S. v. Siegel, and that's a federal case. And I want to point out that
I gave the site, federal site. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Federal second. Yeah.
The federal site is 536 F3rd 306.
F3rd, yes.
Yes, sir. And it's important to distinguish the federal crimes for which the defendant in Siegel was charged with. First, the defendant, she was charged with murdering the victim to prevent him from reporting fraud, and that's a specific federal statute, 18 U.S.C. 1512 A1C. She's also charged with impending an official investigation by transporting the deceased body across state lines. But further, the indictment alleged a broader scheme and artifice to defraud. And in the indictment, it listed many of the prior crimes that the defendant committed in the federal indictment. And under federal rule 404B, you can prove those up. And then there were others that the court considered they were related to the whole scheme and artifice to defraud. The indictment in this case, Your Honor, is simply on June 7th, 2021, the defendant with malice aforethought murdered Ms. Maggie Murdaugh, murdered Mr. Paul Murdaugh, and used violent weapons in commission of those two crimes. There's no scheme and artifice to defraud here.
You're currently addressing it as if the court ruled based on 404. And the court clearly stated that we have not reached any determination on 404, that the basis of the court's ruling was 403, the boating case, as you introduced through the witness, and opening the door by giving testimony, soliciting testimony of generally good character of the defendant, such that neither of the two witnesses could possibly imagine a scenario under which what would cause this crime to have occurred, and the state is entitled to confront that evidence in the manner in which the court ruled. But you're arguing 404. I cited that for an additional basis to say the court will need to look at all of that as we proceed with evidence of prior bad acts, but the basis of the court's ruling was not 404, but 403, opening the door and responding to the evidence that you adduced.
Yes, sir. Hearing outside the presence of the jury on their proposed 404B evidence?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then I can save all the arguments from then. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And again, with regard to planning purposes for the jury, you said a witness, whatever can be done without getting into the 404 or the court's need for an in-camera hearing, where we need to dismiss the jury for whatever period of time that might be, we can press on with what you have otherwise at this time, and whatever that is what we'll hear.
Yes, sir, Your Honor. Like I say, we have one short custodian, and then I think our next witness who's here would be somebody where we would need to address some of the 404. That would be Jeannie Seconder from the law firm. If you give me one moment, I can to confer with my staff, and we can see if we can get some other people rolling so that we can kind of stagger that and continue to have presentations for the jury during the course of the day.
All right. Minutes.
And welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. We're waiting to jump back live into the Alec Murdaugh trial. This is the disgraced attorney accused, or I should say former attorney, accused of killing his wife Maggie and son Paul back on June 7th, 2021. Now, right now, what was happening earlier this morning, outside the presence of the jury is the judge was trying to determine what evidence should be allowed in, particularly the evidence of motive. In other words, the prosecution wants to introduce all of Alec Murdaugh's, alleged past misdeeds, financial crimes, information about the boating accident. And this is all going to be important because the prosecution says this goes to motive. This goes to the idea that his life was crumbling. As a way to distract from that, maybe as a way to get sympathy, he killed his wife and son. Let me bring back in my panel to talk a little bit more about this. I'm joined once again by law and crime legal analyst Julie Rendeman, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Marie Pereira. Marie, I'll start with you. So let's go to that, right? So Judge Newman was ruling on the admission of this evidence as a motive because he was saying, look, defense, you opened the door to character evidence by saying that Murdaugh was in such good character. He's not the type of person to do this. There was even conversation yesterday with Paul's friends to say, can you imagine that Mr. Murdaugh would do this? What did you really know about what was going on with him? And it seems to me it makes sense for the prosecution to be able to present this evidence, the financial crimes, the boating crash. My concern for them is, could it backfire, Marie? This is a complicated story with Alec Murdaugh. Do you think by introducing all of these other stories and information, it might confuse the jury?
I don't think it's going to confuse the jurors. I think that allowing the prosecution to bring up the fact that Alec was a scammer, a thief, a liar, and he embezzled money, misappropriated settlement funds, shows the possibility of the motive that the prosecution wants to show and prove. He was motivated by all of these crimes, okay, not to show that he committed murder, but to show that he wanted sympathy. He wanted to distract everyone from what he was about to face with these crimes. To me, I still agree with Julie. It's a weak motive for homicide and filicide. Let me kill everyone so that everyone will feel sorry for me and not prosecute me for all the financial crimes. It is a weak motive, but since they introduced it, prosecution, they should be allowed to connect the dots and make the story make sense. In order for the story to make sense, they have to present to the jury what was the situation he was looking for sympathy for.
Let's just be very clear about something. You don't have to prove motive. Prosecutors do not have to prove motive in this case. It helps tell the story. It helps prevent something as a reasonable explanation for why this would have happened. But motive is not an element of the crime that the prosecutors have to present. By the way, I mentioned before some of the friends of Paul Murdaugh. Well, let's now turn to Rogan Gibson, one of the friends of Paul Murdaugh. He testified about the defendant. Let's listen to some of that direct examination where he tells what he was in communication with Paul just before the shooting.
During the course of that day, June 7th, 2021, did you have any communications with Paul?
I did.
What's the first one you remember?
Sometime around lunchtime.
All right. What did y'all communicate? Did y'all talk on the phone? Did y'all text or what?
Yeah, I think he called me and told me about the sunflowers had been sprayed in the Doe field and they were dead.
Okay. What did he say about that?
Said that he was getting ready to replant them.
Okay. They'd been sprayed with some Roundup or something?
That's correct.
Did y'all talk about anything else that you remember?
Not that I remember.
While I'm thinking about it, I asked you about Paul and his use of a cell phone. Do you know where he kept his cell phone when it wasn't in his hand?
Most of the time in his pockets.
Was he typically one to respond pretty quick to you? If you were talking about something?
Normally, yeah, if we were talking about something, he would respond pretty quick.
That evening, did you talk to Paul again after that initial conversation?
I did.
All right. And when was that, roughly?
Around 8:40.
Okay. And what was that conversation about?
He called and asked if something was wrong with the dog's tail.
Okay. And was that the first you were hearing about that?
That's correct.
Tell me about your conversation.
I told him that, I wasn't real sure. I just dropped him off there Sunday. And told him let's try to see if he can get me a picture or FaceTime me and let me see what was going on with the dog's tail.
All right. Where was Paul when he called you?
He was at the dog kennels.
And how do you know that?
I could hear the dogs barking in the original call.
Is he describing to you what he's seeing on Cash's tail?
That's correct.
And Cash was at the kennels?
He was.
Did you hear any other voices when you were on the phone with Paul about 8:40?
I did.
And what voices did you hear?
I heard Miss Maggie.
And who else did you hear?
And I thought it was Mr. Ellick that I heard.
You thought it was Mr. Ellick? You talked to Paul, and what did y'all talk about? What was he going to do?
He was going to try to FaceTime me. He said, you know how the service is out here. He said, if I can't get the FaceTime to go through, I'll send you a video.
And why was he going to FaceTime you? What's the difference between FaceTime and a regular call?
So I could see what was wrong with the dog.
And y'all talked about how the service is out here?
That's correct.
And what did you mean by that?
Most of the time you got enough service to make a call. I mean, sometimes calls would break up, but a FaceTime, you couldn't really get a whole lot of service to make the FaceTime call. It's kind of lagging.
Y'all had problems with that before?
That's correct.
Did y'all discuss what to do if the FaceTime didn't work?
We did.
And what was the discussion?
He was going to send me a video of it, of the dog.
He was going to video it and then do what with it? Text it to you?
That's correct.
Is that the last time you ever talked to your friend?
That was.
Did y'all try to FaceTime?
We did.
Did it work?
It came through, but it was kind of lagging. I couldn't tell what was going on.
And then never heard from him again?
That's correct.
Did you ever get that video?
I did not.
Okay, so Julie, let me turn it over to you now. How strong, let me ask you this. The prosecution has tried to establish a timeline of when this has happened, right? I think they've done a really good job based on the testimony that we heard, based on the cell phone evidence. I believe these killings happened at 8:50 or around 8:50. I'm convinced. Are you convinced? Because it seems now what the defense is trying to do is trying to suggest that's not accurate, that these killings might not have happened when the prosecution says, and as I mentioned before earlier in our discussion and with Anjanette Levy, that might be their only avenue here, because how hard is it going to be for them to suggest that wasn't Alec Murdaugh's voice on that kennel video at 8:44, right? So I think they can't go past that. I don't think they can fight that. If they're going to try to fight the timeline, I also don't know if that's going to be successful. What's your take on it?
By the way, the timeline still isn't even that big, because remember, I believe he comes back around 10 o'clock, so there's still a limit in the period of time.
He calls 10:06. He calls 911 at 10:06.
So there's a limit no matter what into when these individuals could have been killed. But yeah, I think they established a perfect timeline in terms of the phone records. And again, I don't think the defense made any headway in terms of saying that that is not the timeline. And, you know, look, Jesse, I want to go back to, you know, we talked about I and they for a while. Remember that first day? It was whether you said I, whether you said they. I didn't care at all about whether it was I or they. I thought it was just a nonsense throwaway statement that did not amount to any question. This is completely different. This, as far as I'm concerned, this actually changed my mind about, at least so far, about whether I believe he's guilty of murder. And this is, to me, going to be the biggest piece of evidence, that lie to the jury.
Well, it's, again, if you believe the prosecution's timeline, this is devastating for Alec Murdaugh, because it looks like he was there. And it's unlike him saying he, you know, last saw his family at dinner and then took a nap and went to see his mom. If he's with them at the kennels at that time, why did he not tell the truth? Now, Rogan was cross-examined on this whole issue of there being or not being a third voice in that kennel video. Let's listen to that.
You listened to this videotape and heard that was your dog, Cash?
It was.
Chocolate Lab?
Yes, sir.
And you heard Ms. Maggie?
Yes, sir.
And you heard Paul, obviously?
That's correct.
And Ms. Maggie was saying he got a
guinea.
Guinea. And then you heard a voice say, no, it's a chicken. Do you remember whose voice that was?
It was Mr. Alex that said it the first time, and then Paul also said it was a chicken.
Okay. And then
are you ready to proceed?
Yes, sir. We do have, again, that custodian witness. Then I think we would have to, we are rolling some additional witnesses, but I think at that time we would have to break and do at least the first in-camera witness. Again, I think that may set the table for a lot of subsequent things. And then we can have some additional work outside of any 404 stuff in the afternoon, Your Honor. But certainly happy to do that, or if you want, we can put up some multiple witnesses on the in-camera here today.
So I think as it relates to each alleged bad act, it must be the court must be informed and proffer and addressed separately. Of course, some may be a series of things occurring almost simultaneously, so that may be a different scenario. But we'll see how it goes. We're ready to proceed with the jury.
Yes, sir, Your Honor.
Jury is present, sir.
All right, thank you. Good morning. Welcome back. Day number 9. State's case. You may call your next witness.
Thank you. State call Heidi Galore.
You affirm the testimony by the court in this trial shall be the truth, so help you God. I do. Thank you. Please take a seat in the witness stand. State your name again for the record. Spell your last name, please.
My name is Heidi Galore. Last name is spelled Galore.
Please call. Good morning, Ms. Galore. Where do you work?
Good morning. I work for SNAP Incorporated.
What are your duties there?
I'm an law enforcement operations lead, so I assist with and help manage a team of folks who respond to law enforcement legal process. Sure. Our team responds to legal process submitted to our company, subpoenas, search warrants, that kind of thing.
All right. So you're in charge of responding to search warrants or subpoenas from law enforcement or other legal entities?
Correct.
All right. And briefly, please, what is Snapchat?
Snapchat, it's an application that was created by Snap Incorporated to help people express themselves. People can connect to their friends, people they know, and I guess you could consider it a social networking type of application.
Is social media another word that could be used for Snapchat?
Yes.
Does it give the ability for individuals to send each other messages?
Yes.
Does it give the ability for individuals to send each other pictures or videos?
Yes.
And in the normal course of its business, does Snapchat keep records if the user so chooses?
Yes.
What kind of records does Snapchat keep?
Basic subscriber information, content that was sent to and from folks, IP logs, geolocation, depending on the settings of the user.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 305 and 304. I'm going to ask if you recognize these two items.
I do. Yes.
And what are you holding?
The paper here is the basic subscriber information for the user that was produced in the search warrant.
And what's that CD?
The CD contains the full production of files that was sent to your agency, requested from the search warrant.
All right, and that was a search warrant from SLED?
Yes.
That Snapchat responded to?
Correct.
Okay. And you said there was subscriber information on that piece of paper, correct?
Yes.
And is that also located on the CD and the digital record?
Yes, yes.
Real quick. And Your Honor, at this time, State would move these into evidence.
No objection, no.
They're admitted without objection.
I'm going to hand you back State's 304. And you indicated that was subscriber information. Is that correct?
Correct.
And can you read for the jury the subscriber information for the information on the account that you provided in response to the search warrant?
Sure. The username is listed here. The username is listed here as Paul9499. Common spelling for Paul. The email address listed here is paulmurdaugh7845@gmail.com. This was created. The account was created on Saturday, May 18th, 2013. There's a creation IP, but it's not listed here. Sometimes it's captured at the time of creation of the account. In this case, it doesn't seem to be. Phone number listed here is 803-842-7845. Display name is listed as Paul Murdaugh, and the status is active.
Okay. And when somebody uses a telephone number, for example, to create a Snapchat account, does Snapchat verify that number?
If the user wants to verify the phone number, yes, they can, but it's not required.
Okay. And what about the email? Is that required?
Not required either, no.
All right. I'm going to hand you State's Exhibit 306. This is already in evidence. And I believe this is a CD. Do you recognize that CD?
Yes, I do.
And have you reviewed the contents of that CD?
Yes, I have.
And what is on the contents of that CD?
It's a video of a subject near a tree, and it's a short video with some audio.
Okay. And did that video, was that part of the full search warrant return that we just talked about?
Yes.
All right. And did you take a look at that video and the records contained in the other CD to determine when that video was first uploaded and first sent?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, let's talk about the upload. Was it uploaded to something called Memories?
Yes.
And can you describe to the jury what is Memories? What does that function with Snapchat?
Memories is kind of like a bucket where you can save your data. You can either create a video or some sort of photo on the app itself and save it to your memories so that it's always there when you need it, or you can upload from your camera, your phone, into Memories to then send to folks later, or just have it in there.
So is that a form of saving, like saving something in the cloud?
Correct, yes. It'll be on the server.
All right. And in reviewing these records, did you determine when this account uploaded that particular video to Memories?
Yes. This video was first seen on Memories on June 7th, 2021 at 7:39 hours Eastern.
And did Snapchat also keep a record when an individual sends out a communication?
Yes.
And did you determine, reviewing the records, whether that account sent out that particular video?
Yes, it was sent on the same day, June 7th, 2021 at 7:56 hours Eastern time.
All right. Thank you. And I'm going to show you, if you look at your monitor in front of you, and I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 306 and see if you recognize it. And did you recognize that video?
That didn't show up on the...
Oh, I'm sorry. Can we get the it on the screen? My apologies. Oops. Okay. What's going on now? try it again. So about that. Can you see the what's on your screen right now?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to play that one more time. Okay. And do you recognize that video, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
All right. And is that video, the video we just discussed, that was part of the Snapchat search warrant return?
Yes.
That you just testified was uploaded at 7:39 p.m. and sent at 7:56 p.m.?
Yes.
No further questions.
Good morning.
Morning.
Can we pull up the Snapchat video, just have it frozen on a screenshot? Doug? I think it's plugged into this computer. All right, that's good. So this is what, or part of what Snapchat gave to the state on July 6th, is that, of 2021. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the state had this on July 6, 2021, in the state's possession,
I believe so, yes.
this information. And you testified that this was uploaded at 7:39 p.m. on the 7th of June, correct?
Correct.
Is that exactly when this video was shot?
I can't tell that information from the production.
Are you certain that's not something that could be told from the, perhaps the metadata for the video file?
There was no metadata produced for this production. It wasn't requested, so it wasn't produced.
So if someone were to right-click on this video file and you know, where it has various metadata that pops up on the screen, would we see a media created date?
I don't know.
Well, let's see if we would. Court's indulgence for a moment. Can you see on the screen the metadata for this file?
Yes.
And does it say June the 7th, 2021 at 7:38 p.m.?
Yes.
And so this was shot basically a minute before it was uploaded, is that correct?
It appears so, yeah.
And I'm sorry if that seems picky, but in this case, you know, every minute and every second, you know, can matter. Does Snapchat keep a list of, and I might be getting the terminology wrong, friends or contacts that Paul would have had on Snapchat?
Yes.
Was that list produced?
No.
And why was that list not produced?
It wasn't requested in this case.
You mentioned earlier geolocation data. Was that produced?
No, not in this case.
And why was that not produced?
I don't believe it was requested.
Is it possible for, I don't know how it works, for some or all of Paul's friends to have access to his location through the app?
Yes, if his settings were, if he made his settings visible, his geolocation visible to his friends, yes.
And would that information about whether that was that setting was in place to allow that, is that something that Snapchat would have had available to produce?
I'm not sure I'm not sure about that. If you can see that it's actually turned on or off.
Was that requested?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
By the state.
Nothing else was here.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Step down. Yes, sir.
The state's next witness would be Jeannie Seconder.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there are matters that must be addressed outside of your presence I do not know exactly how long it would take, but I do not like to have jurors sit in jury rooms just for long periods of time. So we're going to excuse you after you speak for the bailiff. We're going to take a recess with the jury while we deal with these matters. Let's see now, you all have lunch coming at what time? Nobody knows. 1 o'clock, 1:15. All right. Well, we won't need you before lunch. So if you'll go to the jury room and wait for further instructions, but we'll be having you all take a break until around that time. Proceed.
All right. Again, the state we call Jeannie Seckinger.
Raise your right hand. You affirm the testimony you have to give the court in this trial shall be the truth so help you God. Thank you. Take a seat in the witness stand. State your name again for the record. Spell your last name.
My name is Jeannie Seckinger, Seckinger.
Ms. Seckinger, how you doing today?
I'm good.
Good. Let me fix the Elmo real quick. You understand we're here right now outside the presence of the jury for an in-camera hearing to determine the admissibility of some of your testimony.
I do.
And just very quickly, if you would, give us a little bit. I'm not going to go through all the background that I went in front of the jury unless Your Honor would like, but give us a little bit about your background and where you currently work, how that led to where you currently work.
Okay. I graduated with a BS in accounting from USC, went to work in an accounting firm for a few years, then switched to industrial at Westinghouse. And in 1999, I came to work at PMPED, which is Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, as a temporary bookkeeper, and that has grown over the years to the office manager, CFO, accountant, anything business and insurance and HR related.
Okay, and that's for whom?
For Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Elstrop, and Dietrich.
Right, so that's PMPED?
Correct.
And that's the law firm that Alec Murdaugh used to work for?
Correct.
Does that have a different name now?
We are now a new entity that's called Parker Law Group, LLP.
All right. So just very quickly, you've already kind of said this, but go through sort of the financial side of your job duties as it existed for PMPED back in the relevant time periods.
Okay, so my financial duties are, actually I have people under me that do the day-to-day processing of checks, but my duties are to balance and reconcile accounts, provide financial statements, help with all tax documents, preparation of taxes. Also prepared anything for any government census or surveys that we needed, and anything HR related.
I want to ask you a little bit about the financial structure of how PMPED works, if I could. And if you could explain that a little bit. People often think of lawyers as partners, but are they called partners under the employment agreement that everyone signed?
No, we're called partners when we refer to each other as they're in the business, but for tax purposes, everybody was an owner. It was a C corporation, so everybody's shareholders. And within Peters Murdaugh Parker, every employee was a salaried employee, including the partners.
Okay. And did the employment agreement that everyone signed require that any fees or money generated by any partner or lawyer by the firm had to go to the firm?
It did.
And explain to me how, if you're let's just call them, quote, partner, if you're a partner, how does the compensation work? What are the elements of compensation as it worked under the PMPED structure back in 2021 and prior?
So every partner received a base salary that they would receive in biweekly payments throughout the year. That was set at a level of about $125,000. The majority of their pay came through an end-of-the-year bonus, which is when we closed out the books and settled on the books. And primarily, after overhead and expenses were met, the net profit was divided amongst those partners. And in a simplified form, it was basically distributed based on a ratio of the fees that they brought in percentage to the total.
Right. But that distribution would not take place until when?
Usually the last week of December.
Yes, sir.
Waters, there's distracted. Can you repeat the previous question for me?
Yes, sir. Going back a second, Joe, we were talking a little bit about the compensation structure for PMPED as it existed in 2021. And if you could, again, explain to the court how that worked. How are partners, and we're going to call them loosely that term, how are they compensated?
Okay. Partners are employed salaries who are paid a biweekly paycheck throughout the year with a base salary of $125,000. And at the end of the year, they received a bonus check, usually in the last week of the year, that divided up the remaining profits of the firm based upon the percentage of revenue each attorney brought into the total.
All right. So when fees came in, they're going to be attributed to a particular lawyer, and ultimately that's going to be a percentage of the total revenues, and that's going to determine their percentage of the compensation at the end of the year after all overhead is paid.
Correct.
Is there also some sort of 7.5% fund or fee or something like, or amount that's put aside?
There is. You would take the gross bonuses that are the gross fees everybody brought in, less than overhead, and once we get to that number, everybody would throw in a pot 7.5%, and that money was divided back equally among the employees. And then a new percentage was arrived at to determine how much everybody would receive of the net income.
All right. So you have to take care of overhead, right?
Yes.
And what is an overhead, just generally?
Overhead is just basically the expenses to run the business, what it costs us to advance client costs, what it costs to pay our employees, what it costs to rent the building, to provide equipment, office supplies, postage, etc.
Right. And that's got to be accounted for, and then you got to account for the 7.5% as well, correct?
That's right.
All right. And then only after that does each partner get compensation based on their relative contribution during that year.
Correct.
All right. Is typically the vast majority of compensation received by a partner at PMPED received in that distribution at the end of the year?
Yes.
And when does that take place?
The last week of the year, generally speaking.
Okay. And what is the point of that goal? Why do you want to sort of clear out all the money and clear the books?
So basically, that we don't want to leave the money in there to be taxed by the corporation because it's a C Corp entity, so the objective is to get it out to the partners and avoid double taxation.
And so because of that, is it up to each individual partner to essentially manage the bulk of their compensation that's received in one lump sum during the course of the next year?
Yes, they need a budget.
All right, let me show you what's been marked for purposes of this hearing as States 310 and see if you recognize that document.
Yes, this is the employment agreement each shareholder/partner would have signed.
Okay. And I just want to direct your attention to number 2, and if you could tell the court what that provision that's signed by all the partners says.
It says the employee accepts such employment and agrees that the employee will devote the employee's entire time and endeavor to the employer's business.
All right. And then number 3, if you could read that to the court, please.
Services for the benefit of the employer. All professional services rendered by the employer shall be rendered as an employee of the employer, and all proceeds and remuneration received therefore shall inure to the employer's benefit.
Okay. Now tell me what that means.
That means that all fees earned should come through payable to PMPD.
All right. And so if a lawyer earns fees, is it appropriate at all for those fees to go directly to the lawyer as opposed to going through the law firm?
No.
Is that a hard rule to understand?
No.
Anybody ever have a problem with that rule or not understand it?
No.
Pretty easy and hard and fast rule in that firm, correct?
That's right.
If you get the money written straight to you, what is that?
The money's taken straight to you?
Yeah.
That would be stealing it.
Stealing. Please, could y'all turn the screen for me? All right. So, is that better? So, can you see that in the seconder?
Yes.
All right. So, 2 and 3 are the provisions you were just referring to?
That's correct.
Tell me just a little bit of your observation. How long have you known Alec Murdaugh? Let me ask you that.
I've known Alec since I was in high school, so roughly 40 years.
Okay. And how long have you worked with him, or did you work with him?
About 23, 24 years, since 1999.
And did he have a lucrative practice in your observation?
Yes, he did well.
Was he sometimes getting as much as 7 figures in the end of the year?
He has.
Are you familiar with what's been called the boat case?
Yes.
And tell me what your understanding of the boat case is, just generally. What was that?
Generally speaking, it was an accident that several children got in one evening where it was in Paul's, or the Murdaugh's boat. Paul was accused as the driver, and there were a lot of civil suits and some criminal proceedings going on related to that crime.
And following the boat case, is it your understanding that Paul Murdaugh was charged?
Yes.
Is it your understanding that Alec Murdaugh was civilly sued?
Yes.
And there was ongoing civil litigation at the time Paul and Maggie were murdered?
That's correct.
After the boat case happened, did you and Alec ever have any discussions about structuring fees?
We did. We did in late May of 2021. Right about the end of the month, we had some discussions about Hirschberger. A disbursement came through that he had tried to send his fees to a structured settlement, and the conversation was that he had done it improperly, because to structure fees properly, it has to be part of the release. It has to go straight from the insurance company straight to the structured annuity place, and we would need to be told about it in our firm so we could account for it in our 7.5%. But in this particular case, Alec had sent the money directly to Forge. We discussed the fact that it would not be any tax benefit to him, and at that point in time he said he was not really worried about the tax benefit of it, and he said he was trying to put some money in Maggie's name due to the boat wreck, and that he was trying to figure out if he was going to structure fees for the future.
Okay. Did he say he was trying to do a favor for anyone too?
He did say he was friends with Michael Gunn, and who is the owner of, or one of the operators of Forge, and that he was going to try to put up to about $250,000 into a structure as a favor for Michael Gunn.
All right, when you say Forge, what are you talking about?
So Forge is a company that does structured annuities.
You have the full name real quick?
It's Forge Consulting.
All right, let's call it Forge Consulting.
Okay, Forge Consulting.
All right, tell me about Forge Consulting and what they are.
They're a company that will do structured annuities for clients. They'll do structured fees for attorneys. They do some wealth management. They do minor pool trust. They have several different things that they do. I think they've branched out into insurance coverage now. They provide a lot of financial tools.
Now, when you say that you had a conversation with him about him supposedly structuring fees, how did this come to your attention?
It came to my attention over the fact that a disbursement, one of my secretaries or my assistant brought to me that had been brought to her attention by Alec's secretary or paralegal Annette Griswold, and came and asked me if this was proper, and then came to me after the fact, and that's when I went and had conversations with Alec about this.
Okay. And so had the money already been paid?
Yes.
And you went to Alec and you asked, what's this about?
Yes.
And he said, I'm doing what?
I'm trying to defer and put money into Maggie's name, structure some fees.
Did he tell you where that money had gone? What was your belief where that money had gone after you talked to Alec?
My belief was it had gone to Forge Consulting.
The real entity,
Yes.
Forge Consulting?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to show you just real quick what's been marked for purposes of this hearing as States 311 and see if you recognize that series. I think there's 4 documents in there.
Yes, these are the Hirschberger settlement documents, which is the case that we're talking about, the fee that he sent as a structure.
Okay. And are there 1 or 2 in there ultimately?
There are ultimately 2. There's one that's structured to look like a fee, and then the other one was structured to look like it was client's money that was being sent on the client's behalf.
Which one were you aware of at the time?
I was aware of the fee one for the $83,333.33.
All right. At the time, did you think that any money had been misappropriated or stolen, or did you just think Alec was trying to sort of divert some money because of the boat case, but not necessarily anything misappropriated at that
Right.
time?
We were not thinking about him misappropriating funds or stealing any client funds. What we were concerned about was he was trying to either defer income by leaving it in somebody's trust or either trying to put some money into Maggie's name to avoid things for the boat accident.
And when you say we were concerned, who's concerned?
Myself and some of the partners.
Why are y'all concerned about him potentially trying to put money in a structure or in Maggie's name because of the boat case?
Well, because that would be wrong and we did not want any part of that.
Let me put this up on the screen real quick. All right. Do you recognize this document right here?
Excuse me. Yes, that's the document that is in question with the $83,333.33 fee sent to Forge.
All right. And right there, tell me what this disbursement sheet is very quickly. Explain that to the court.
So this is where the client recovered $250,000. You can see it came from 3 different insurers. And we would take a portion of our fee. Generally, this looks like a third, and our expenses of $9,300. The Sedgwick claims would have been a lien that we were paying off, and then the $140,678.55 would have been the money dispersed between the beneficiaries of that estate.
And what is this line right here?
That would represent the fee.
All right. At this point in time, had you actually seen the check that was made out for those fees?
I don't recall if I actually looked at it at that point in time.
And normally fees, where would they go?
Normally, if fees would come to us and we would deposit into our income account, what we call our income account.
Okay. So fees come in from somebody who pays the settlement. Where do they go initially? What account do they go in?
To the income account, the PMPD operating income account.
Okay. Fees go in there?
Yes.
All right. When a settlement comes in, where does it go?
It goes into a client trust account for the benefit of the client.
And then the portion of that is allocated for fees, it goes from the trust account to where?
To the income account.
Okay. It usually doesn't go out to Forge Consulting or anything like
No.
that. After you had that conversation at Alec, did you follow up any more on the matter?
We had a couple of conversations about it in relation to when we were having some other conversations, but we didn't really readdress this again until late September, late August, early September.
Did you kind of put it on the back burner?
I did. I was at that point, it had been done, and I was trying to figure out how we were going to account for it on our books, and just kind of had it out there as a reminder to try to put in my mind later to see if anything else had been done like that, or to see if he was going to try to do that again.
After that particular event, you said that was in late May sometime?
You're right.
Did another matter come to your attention about disbursements as it related to Alec Murdaugh's practice in his business?
It did.
And tell me what that was, please.
So this was a case called the Ferris versus Mack truck case. And on a Monday, I believe it was May 24th, Annette Griswold called me and said that she had something she needed to discuss with me. I was out of the office that day in our Waldoboro office, but when I returned, we met. And when she showed me, what had happened was we received a check for our client expenses. So this case was actually dispersed by the associated attorney, which was Chris Wilson. So he sent us a check for the money that we had forwarded as client expenses, but we did not receive a fee check. And that in itself is odd generally.
And why is that odd? Why did Annette call you? Because y'all had received a fee check from Alec's best friend, Chris Wilson, but not the expense check, but not the fee check.
Right. Most of the time we receive them together. Well, Annette, when she did not receive them together, called my assistant, Nicole, to make sure we had not already received the fee, verified that we had not already received the fee, and at that point, Annette had some conversations with Vicki Lyman in Chris's office. And Vicki informed Chris that their bosses had already got the fee when the settlement was signed, which had happened in March, and this was May.
And Vicki informed Chris, or Vicki informed Annette?
Vicki informed Annette of that.
All right. So why is that a concern to you that now you're hearing the fee's already been paid?
Because now we know we don't have the check. We've never received it. So either he's got a fee, either he's got a check he hasn't turned into us that is properly payable to PMPD, or he's received a check payable to him.
All right. And when you were considering the possibility that he perhaps received a check payable to him, aside from that being stealing, as you had earlier testified to it, what's your concern then?
Saying that he's trying to hide money from the boat wreck.
Hide money from the boat wreck. All right, stand by for me. I'm going to show you what's been marked as, for the purposes of this hearing, as Exhibit 312, and see if you recognize this document.
Yes, this is the expense check that we received in the Ferris matter.
Okay. And,
from Wilson Law Group.
Just quick flip through it and just tell me generally what's in that packet.
The rest of the packet is our deposit, which is an internal record, our client cost report, which matches that expense check. Then the rest of it, the second what I'm looking at right now is a check made payable to Richard Alexander Murdaugh, Esquire, for $192,000, and it references Ferris fees.
Okay, keep going.
Next page is the deposit, where it says Bank of America deposit only. and it looks like ACH. That looks like, it actually looks to me like Alec's initials, and then it says Bank of America.
Is there a series of emails after that?
Series of emails starts with Vicki Lyman informing Annette Griswold about the fact that their bosses had received the fee back when the disbursement was signed.
All right, let me put those emails up on the screen. I believe there's no objection versus this hearing. All right. So this is email, and Annette Griswold, explain to the judge who Annette Griswold is, please.
Annette Griswold is one of Alec's primary paralegals.
Okay. And right here, this is an email that was ultimately sent to you as part of bringing this to your attention?
Yes.
All right. And what is she asking right there?
She said, why just expenses and no fee?
All right. All right. And what was the response there?
Dear friend, it is only cost because your boss and mine and Liz's got their fees once they were signed.
Okay. So, and that's informing you that Chris Wilson's office says they already got the fees.
Correct.
All right. After that, did you have a conversation with Annette what to do?
I did. I actually talked with Lee Cope. We went to Lee. Sometimes a lot of the partners are not in the office, and Lee Cope was the one who was in the office. So I went to talk to Lee about what. Of course, Annette was worried about getting, ramifications if she was wrong and didn't want to be in trouble. So Lee and I decided to take it over from there. And the course of action that we decided upon was that I would send an email to Annette requesting the disbursement, the supporting documents, and the general ledger printout from Chris Wilson's office, which is what we keep in our office.
All right. And if we go right here, is that the email you're speaking of right there?
That is.
All right. What's the date on that?
May 27th.
All right. And so then what happens to that email from there if we look over to the next page?
So apparently Vicki in Chris Wilson's office was on vacation. So on June 2nd, Annette clarifies with Vicki what exactly we were looking for. And again, she asked for the full disbursement paperwork, including the disbursement sheets, expenses, supporting docs, and ledger.
All right. And you're included on that email?
I am CC'd, yes.
Okay. All right. Did y'all ultimately get a response on that?
Vicki responded that she would have to send that email to Chris because she did not have privy to that information. So that was on the 2nd. The next day, Alec came into my office early and asked me why I needed that information and assured me that the money was in Chris Wilson's account and that they could get it any time.
Okay. And did y'all discuss anything further when you had that conversation?
Just that we needed to get it, or I needed proof that it was there, that it was necessary to get it. At that point, I didn't indicate to him that I thought it was missing. I was just asking for the documentation.
And that was on what day?
It was sometime in between June 2nd and June 7th.
Okay. All right. On June 7th, did the issue come back to a head?
The issue did come back to heads.
Just clear, this is June 7th, 2021.
Yes.
And how much were these fees supposed to be, did you know?
$792,000 in total.
And to this point, the firm had not received those fees, is that correct?
That's correct.
And Chris Wilson's office is saying initially, we already dispersed them.
Yes. And Chris Wilson's not saying anything to me.
Was, to your knowledge, was an inquiry made to Chris Wilson at that time?
Lee Cope, we had not inquired Chris Wilson other than requesting this information at this point in time.
All right. So tell me about June 7th. How does that go?
So on June 7th, I was going to make another run at finding out from Alec if we had the information. I went upstairs to his office is on the second floor, and he was leaning on a file cabinet outside his office. And he turned and looked at me when I came up and said, "What do you need now?" And gave me a very dirty look, not a look that I'd ever received from Alec, from just kind of frustrated with me look, which made me go, "Oh, you want to know? Let's go in your office." So we went in the office and closed the door, and at that point I told him that I had reason to believe that he had received the funds himself and that I needed proof that he had not.
received those fees himself.
Yes.
And I needed proof that there or not.
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He told me again, he assured me that the money was there and that he could get it. And at that point, I said, I'm just trying to do my job, and if I don't get this paperwork and verify that with these questions, I'm not doing my job. He actually acted like he respected that, and again said that that money was there, and that he, again, was trying to decide what he was going to be doing with it.
And did y'all get to conclude that conversation, or just something interrupted?
We did not. He took a phone call in the middle of that conversation. That phone call was about his father who was in the hospital, that he was going to be terminal, and that there was nothing else they'd be able to do for his father. So that changed the mood of the conversation. We quit talking about business, and I immediately asked about him and his family and his dad, and we got talking as friends at that point, concern over the family. And after that, I shortly left, so it briefed and cut down the conversation.
All right. You come in there asking for proof where that money was because you had reason to believe he took it, and then the conversation ultimately got short by the call about his father.
Yes.
Did you have a conversation later in the day with Alec?
I did. Around 4 o'clock, my phone rang, and I remember that because I had been under the impression Alec was going to leave and go to the hospital or leave to deal with his father. And around 4 o'clock, my office extension rang, and at that point, he was asking me for some information on his 401k balances because he stated he was working on some financials for the hearing on the boat accident that was later in the week.
There was a hearing later in the week, and he was working on financials for the boat accident.
Correct.
Did that strike you as odd?
That he called and asked me? Yeah. No, he had asked me before. So, and I would be the one to give him the 401k. So it didn't surprise me that he's calling to ask me about that. But I was surprised that he was in the building working on it.
And why was that?
I just thought he was leaving a deal with his father.
Because that interrupted the prior conversation.
That's right.
Is that the last conversation you had with him?
It is.
When did you find out about the murders?
I initially found out through the rumor mill around 10:30 or 11 o'clock the evening of them, but I did not get confirmation until I received a text from the partner roughly 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Were you shocked by that?
Yes.
Scared?
Yes.
Worried?
Yes.
Worried for Alec?
Worried for everybody, yes, especially Alec.
In the wake of the murders, do you know if the hearing that was later that week got canceled?
It did get canceled.
That was a hearing in the boat case where he's personally a defendant?
That's my understanding, yes.
In the wake of the boat case, did you and the partners have a discussion about what to do about getting to the bottom of these Ferris fees?
We did. We did not the week of the murders because pretty much our office shut down the week of the murders, and then his father also passing away. But when we got back around to it, Lee and Mark Ball and I were the ones doing the discussion. Lee decided that he would call Chris Wilson himself directly and try to get the information, and Lee took over from there.
In the wake of the murders, did anyone want to bring that up to Alec again?
No, nobody wanted. Alec was distraught and upset and not in the office much, and nobody wanted to harass him about nothing that we thought was really missing. We had several months till the end of the year to clear it up, so we were not going to harass him at that point in time.
So that part just got stopped in its tracks, is that true?
Yes, Lee took over calling Chris Wilson and trying to pursue it.
All right, and when was that? You said in July sometime?
Yes, probably early July.
All right, and what was the result of that?
Lee said, and you could speak to him more clearly, but Lee said Chris Wilson got off the phone pretty quick with him, which was surprising because apparently Chris Wilson has the gift of gab. But again, Chris assured Lee that it was there.
All right. Ultimately, did y'all get an email about this particular issue?
We did. Ultimately, on July 9th, stating that the money was in Chris Wilson's trust.
You still here, Silentium? Yeah, it's an interesting case. But he's screwed himself in a lot of ways. Like, for this guy to be a lawyer, he really screwed the pooch. One with shooting his, or allegedly shooting his wife and son with the same style ammo and potentially the same guns that he actually had registered, that he had owned. Very, very stupid. Awesome, Silentium. Cool. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Because there's a lot of damning evidence. There's a lot of damning evidence. They're not really touching on it too much, but they got the phone. How, like in Idaho, they got the guy's phone information, and it shows that he was driving around that house and all that stuff. Well, in this one, it shows that I guess he had like some kind of fit app or something to where it counts your paces, how many steps you take. And it was very interesting that at a certain time, which is when they're predicting the murders were happening, he walked a lot of paces. And what he was doing was he had left his car at the house. He went and killed them over at the stables, and then ran to the house, changed, did whatever he was going to do with the clothes that was full of blood, and then drove out like he was going to his mom's or something, supposedly going to his mom's. That's what he was saying. But it just shows that he was walking a lot of paces, which would be that he was walking the yard, from the stables or from the dog kennels over to the house. And like I said, a 300 round, which is what he shot what somebody shot his son with, made his brain fly out of his head, hit the ceiling, and then land at his feet. Not even joking. Sorry if that's too graphic, but the point is that round, that 300 round,